10 days ago, the poet Mary Oliver died. 4 days after the service that our intern minister, Sarah, had crafted around a poem of Mary Oliver's. The last line of that poem, do you remember? And what will you do with your one wild and precious life? Sarah had gotten folks from across the decades to speak about their wild and precious lives. It's a service, I think, that should be repeated every year. Yes. With different people sharing their wild and precious lives and giving honor to Mary Oliver. But that's not the only reason that I bring her up to you this morning. I bring her up to you because for many of us come-inners into Unitarian Universalism, her poetry, accessible, and in celebration of that interdependent web of which we are a part, an articulation of the relationship with the natural world that so many of us hold as sacred, these words of hers were our new scriptures. They articulated a theology, a way of being in the world that answered our question, how shall we live? Her poems are infused with UU values, whether or not she intended them to be. For she held up the natural world with the same sort of sanctity that a Catholic priest holds up the host during communion. And so many of us tasted of her sacred world. The poem Wild Geese, which Augie just read, it's also in the back of our hymnal, by the way. It was my first introduction not only to Mary Oliver, but to what was possible religiously and spiritually in UUism. In fact, I had a framed poster of it in my office until a few years ago. I gave it to a colleague who was retiring. And as I gave it to her and hugged her, I whispered into her ear a slight variation, "You no longer have to be good." In that line, "You do not have to be good," Oliver offers redemption, salvation, and liberation from the confines of theologies that have kept so many of us locked in shame and a sense of worthlessness. You do not have to be good. You do not have to walk on your knees for 100 miles through the desert repenting. Those words, they're a litany of forgiveness. She goes on to say that we only have to let the soft animal of your body love what it loves. How many religious or spiritual traditions not only embrace our animal bodily selves, but ask us to inhabit and affirm them? What if the answer to the question, how shall we live, is answered in letting the soft animal of our bodies love what they love? What if the only answer to what to do with our lives and how to infuse them with meaning is love? To love, however imperfectly. How many traditions have at their core love, but require excavation to find that love? You know, many religious traditions have creeds, and creeds are statements about, this is true. A credo, which some people will write if you take the Building Your Own Theology class here, means I believe statements. And to back up those credos, then you have something called doctrines, which are the rules and regulations of how to live out those credos. Some traditions have scriptures, the holy writings that inform their tradition. And some of that scripture is in prose or poetic form, but much is not. We don't have creeds. We don't have doctrines. It's often said that it's our actions that define us. We have poems, and we have prose. The words of men and women and those who identify as they across the ages from a lot of religious traditions. And we look to the experiential, both individually and communally. Our prophets are sometimes poets just as much as they are social justice advocates. For the poets show us what is possible when imagination meets creativity, when the mind and heart meet the word. They flesh out meaning and meaning-making. Mary Oliver goes beyond even love. She offers our mere humanness blessing. She proclaims our place in the family of things. How many of us are told that we belong, that we have a place, that we are worthy, a part of the family of things, of all that is? And of course, for Oliver, there is no separate family for humans, but a family of the interconnected web, principle number 7 in Unitarian Universalism, of which we are a part. Human, animal, natural. Here in Eugene, we have Canada geese that winter over with us. Year-round, they are in flight, harsh and exciting in their honking calls. Here in Eugene, the geese announce over and over again, reminding us like a crucifix reminds a Catholic of their place in the world, our place in the family of things. This past Wednesday, I was up early in the dark preparing food for the day. I was mulling over this sermon, and there was a loud noise breaking open the quiet in the dark. It was the cry of a lone goose. A half hour later, as the dog and I returned from the park, the light had broken through. And suddenly above us, there were 3 pairs of geese calling to one another. And after them, a V of 6 more calling. Whoever you are, writes Oliver, no matter how lonely, the world offers itself to your imagination, calls to you like the wild geese, harsh and exciting, over and over, announcing your place in the family of things. I try to hear their sound as an announcement that I too have a place in the family of things. What if each of us awoke every morning to such an announcement? In 2006, Oliver published a collection of poems called Simply Thirst. The poems in it, as the inside cover flap reads, quote, grapple with grief at the death of her beloved partner of over 40 years, and chronicles for the first time her discovery of faith without abandoning her love of the physical world. If Wild Geese gives us a UU blueprint, her poem from the collection Thirst, the poem called The Place I Want to Get Back To, adds yet another layer to our UU meaning making. And that layer is gratitude. And here is that poem. The place I want to get back to is where in the pine woods, in the moments between the darkness and first light, 2 deer came walking down the hill, and when they saw me, they said to each other, okay, this one is okay. Let's see who she is and why she is sitting like that, so quiet as if asleep or in a dream, but anyway harmless. And so they came on their slender legs and gazed upon me, not unlike the way I go out to the dunes and look into the faces of flowers. And then one of them leaned forward and nuzzled my hand. And what can my life bring to me that could exceed that brief moment? For 20 years, I have gone every day to the same woods, not waiting exactly, just lingering. Such gifts bestowed can't be repeated. If you want to talk about this, come to visit. I live in the house near the corner, which I have named Gratitude. Of course, she did go out for 20 years to those same woods, knowing simultaneously that the longing for the gift of the deer's nuzzle would always compete with what cannot be repeated. And yet still more than a longing for the repeating of that experience is how that experience informed her life and shaped it into one of gratitude. What is it like to live in the house named Gratitude? Once again, what would our days be like if we lived from gratitude for all that is, for the days when miracles like a deer's nuzzle of our hand occur, as well as for the days when someone we love is suddenly killed and taken from us? Gratitude for what is, rather than a longing for what is not. If we live with gratitude, we live with possibility. At the board meeting this past week, Poppy Lockridge posed this question: what is needed to create an environment of possibility? What habits foster an environment of possibility? And she did so to help the board enter more deeply into this month's theme of possibility. I, of course, being the preacher, was the first one to respond. I said that possibility required an eject button. To eject we've always done it that way, that it involved a letting go, that possibility needed a way to make space for something new to emerge, that it required listening. At least I think that's what I said. What I wish now is that I had added gratitude. It requires gratitude for what has been, what is, and what might be. Because gratitude doesn't discriminate, but says thank you again and again and again. It also knows when to let go, to acknowledge and send something on its way. Again, what is opened in any of you when you live with an attitude of gratitude? Here are some of the other board members' responses to that question. Audacity. The sheer audacity to think about what is possible. The courage and energy and commitment that it takes. Shifting one's mindset from seeing roadblocks to asking instead, what if? Making space in a consistent way, making an opening. Creativity. Knowing one's capacity, one's history, as well as what one wishes for, at the same time being realistic about one's capacity. Trusting and accompanying one another pastorally. Vulnerability. Putting one's ideas out there, not being judged nor judging. Being able to receive another's ideas. Realizing that possibility is not finite. Taking risks, yet taking them within the safety net of covenant. Commitment to the community to make things possible. And lastly, looking for heaven on earth. Believing it is possible and brought about by the way we live our lives. This question, what is needed to create an environment of possibility is the question for this community at this time in its life. This is a community come alive. And so what does that aliveness make possible? What tools or skills do we need to make possibility a reality? We need imagination, for that is what helps us dream of what is possible. We need creativity, for that is how imagination is realized. We need to eject buttons to those old, we need eject buttons that help us eject those old internal mantras that say, we've always done it this way before, or we already tried that and it didn't work. We need the audacity to insist that this community is filled with possibility and that it is a necessary and needed voice in the religious, social, and political landscape of Eugene and Lane County. We need to make space for new ideas of what church is and how to do the work of church. We need to protect and hold open space for what is possible. We have to develop an inner resistance to rest in what is familiar or comfortable. Church, I was once told by a layperson, is not supposed to be comfortable. Safe, but not always comfortable. We have got to believe that the world we dream about, the world we imagine, that heaven can be realized in our lifetime on this earthly plane. We've got to see as possible the collective power of a community committed to values that resist all that dehumanizes and destroys the family of things. The values we uphold, not having to crawl through deserts for redemption, loving the soft animalness that we are, the sharing of our despair and hopes as connection, the affirmation that we are all being called to by all that is, to understand that we have a place in the interconnected web of life. It's not only resistance, but it creates possibility. We have to discover, or perhaps the better term is uncover, our capacity for possibility. For this community to engage in the question of what is possible, we also need to interact from the place of trust and covenant. Covenants define how we want to be in relationship to one another. They say, this is what my highest intentions and ideals I can promise you. And covenant also calls us back into right relationship when it has been broken, when relationships have frayed. Covenant is about the way we hold ourselves accountable to the commitment we have made to this community when we choose membership or to be active in it. Now, I want to remind you that covenants are not baseball bats, but they are a mutual binding of each of us, not only to another, but to what is possible for this community as a whole. Who shall you become? What shall you be? What is the capacity of your imagination, creativity, and financial resources? Just what is possible for UUCE as we ride this wave of energy and aliveness? When starting to explore what is possible, we need to start not by crawling on our knees, but by responding to the calling of the geese who announce our place in the family of things. I want to leave you with one last poem of Mary Oliver's. It's the last poem in the collection, Thirst. You may have to translate some of the language, but not the process that she describes. For that process has to do with what we need to let go of in order to hold or create an openness for what is possible. a sort of internal spiritual and religious decluttering or recalibration, finding a new magnetic north for ourselves. The poem is simply called Thirst. Another morning, and I wake with thirst for the goodness I do not have. I walk out to the pond, and all the way God has given us such beautiful lessons. Oh Lord, I was never a quick scholar, but sulked and hunched over my books past the hour and the bell. Grant me in your mercy a little more time. Love for the earth and love for you are having such a long conversation in my heart. Who knows what will finally happen or where I will be sent? Yet already I have given a great many things away, expecting to be told to pack nothing except the prayers which with this thirst I am slowly learning. May we slowly, intentionally, and with a fierce perseverance learn what is possible.